Come on, we know everyone's thinking it. The Gen 8 starters look like Fakemon, don't they? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I actually want to use that idea as the main discussion point of this video because I feel like it's very possible this time around Gamefreak could be taking inspiration from the fans for a lot of different reasons. That right now, Gamefreak doesn't have the most favor with even some of the most dedicated, old school, hardcore Pokemon fans, and that's because of the decisions that they've been making over the last couple of years, games, generations, and stuff like that. And maybe they've also noticed the rising popularity of like alternative evolutions for the starters as they're announced, or maybe just Fakemon in general, and how some people appreciate the designs from the fans more than what Game Freak ends up putting out, and maybe using that to kind of like show Game Freak is listening, Game Freak cares, or just for some creative inspiration as well. That Europe, or not Europe, but England, has been talked about as a potential region for a while now, so what better source than artists from the area that would like to see their region represented in specific ways with specific Pokemon. So I'm not saying like copying Fakemon too much, but maybe kind of looking at what the fans are creating and then using that for a little bit of inspiration. I think that's pretty cool. Also, with what we've seen from the Detective Pikachu movie, they hired the real-life Pokemon artist, and then they based the designs of the Pokemon for the entire movie off that guy. That's pretty crazy, so it does show like Game Freak is listening, but man, when I saw this picture, you know, it's a little different when you look at the trailer, you see the Pokemon in motion, you kind of get an idea for how they work, but when you just see the flat art right there, that just feels like, in my head, the conglomeration of every single fake starter Pokemon leak I've seen for the past few years. I'm even talking about like before Pokemon X and Y came out, like Gen 6, Gen 7, last year before we had Pokemon Let's Go, Gen 8 fake starters or the leaks or all that stuff that people talk about. Like that just feels like it. And it gets even crazier, like the more you look at it, the more it feels that way. I've also been looking up some fan art of these Pokemon because, I mean, the artists are on fire. No pun intended. But I mean, when I look at that, that seems like an art concept take on a Fakemon. Not necessarily the Fakemon being made itself, but just kind of taking it to that next level. Just maybe the cartoony style is also what's going on here. And that brings us to the classics as well. That last year, these guys blew up the internet because they looked so good. Whoever made these, before we figure out that it was made by 50 Shades of Heliolisk, but whoever made these, they understood Pokemon on such an insane level that it felt like it could have been made by the real things. There were a couple of design choices and a couple of things that were different, and also they don't have the printers, they don't have access to the tools and what Game Freak uses, because like the digital looked different from like the fake scans and stuff that we saw, so it kind of fell apart. But overall, this looks like a concept art that you would see for the Pokemon. The same poses, same facial expressions. Guy did his research, and the Pokemon also feel very possible. And then going up through the evolutions, a lot of these seem like they would work very well in the Pokemon world. But then we got Flambit, or Scorbunny, or whatever one's real at this point. I don't even know. I can't even tell. Now this one's also really interesting because Scorbunny kind of keeps confirming the Zodiac theory that the fire starter Pokemon are based off the Chinese Zodiac. So that's also where a lot of Fakemon artists are getting their inspiration. And maybe that was something that was a coincidence turned real by the fans, or maybe Game Freak had that idea from the very beginning, which is also something crazy to think about. So yeah, it's not the exact same, but still going to be familiar and similar like that. And also, like, what direction can you take the evolution of a bunny? We're going to have Flame Lopunny 2.0, unless they do something pretty crazy, so who knows. But I like the idea. Like, when I'm looking at this, I can see promise for what Game Freak is going to make, and not necessarily just from the idea of, oh, if it doesn't look like this, I'm going to hate it. Not saying my expectations too high, but I think with Scorbunny, they've already put themselves on a pretty solid path. We had nothing to do with the Platypus guy, but that just kind of shows that, like, the Fakemon, it just feels like this could be the generation that has some Fakemon inspiration, which also makes me happy because even though I hate all these fake leaks and all the garbage that people cover, just giving them attention for no reason, where it's like, oh, look at this, well, it could be fake, you know, that just needs to get cut out of the Pokemon community entirely. But at the same time, if you can appreciate it as a fake concept, if you can think about it as something that could be implemented in Pokemon, that's a more healthy way of taking it, and I love the idea of a possum Pokemon. Now, I'm not talking about the final form because I feel like forcing a fighting evolution with some zombie elements makes things a little weird, but I know what the artist was going for, that this was made before Marshadow, so I guess the idea was trying to like create a ghost fighting concept since it's unique typing that never existed, and I can like some of the other things about it, you know, since possum carry their young around, it leads to some comical looking things, but that could also be represented in the Pokemon, so also taking the creativity of just thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of designs and artists and concepts, and then maybe giving Gamefreak a little bit of inspiration that way, I think could be pretty good. When you think about it, or even when I think about it, I've seen some Fakemon that could be thrown into the Pokedex and have no disruption whatsoever because they feel like real, true, official Pokemon. Now, there's a lot of other Fakemon that because of the artist style or because of like the way that it's designed really wouldn't pull that off. But I mean, a Possum would be dope. Like, we need a ghost, play dead, Possum Pokemon at some point in Pokemon's life. Please, Game Freak, make it happen. Do something cool like that. But I'm not going to get my expectations set too high. Maybe Game Freak's basing off of Fakemon, maybe Game Freak isn't. Who knows at this point? But the starters have this feel different to the other stars. Like, you look at the starters for the Alola region, and they actually had like a very Pokemon feel. It almost felt like the first generation or two all over again with the way they were received and the way their designs kind of just grew on me instantly and really felt like they immediately fit in the Pokemon world. Not really having that too much with the Generation 8 starters. But even if Game Freak is just kind of set in their ways and they have their idea for the designs and they're going to keep it that way, I'm fine with it. There were very, very few Pokemon I disliked in the Alola region. Like, pretty much it's Crabominable, Crabrawler, not really too much a fan of Gumshoes, and the Sandcastle Pokemon kind of grew on me. So outside of the Mythicals, the Legendaries, and the Ultra Beasts, because those kind of designs are kind of weird, I mean, it's a major plus. It's a major win. Like, I love Pick-a-Peck. That's an adorable regional bird that is just awesome. Shiinotic's good. All these Pokemon just work out, or 99% of them. Not really, but, you know, like 95, 90%, whatever. You know, a massive amount of them work so well. The Alolan Pokemon. This is, like, Alolan Marowak is one of the most creative designs that you could only imagine from some kind of Fakemon artist, where it's like, hey, let's take that Kanto lore, let's take the Pokemon Tower, let's take the Marowak Ghost, and let's turn it into a real Pokemon that looks sweet. Fire Staff, Ghost Marowak. I already like Marowak and Cubone. Those Pokemon are sweet, and they were made even better and then given new life in a future generation. So stuff like that is something that I love so much. I think it's definitely a possibility. And going back to some of the other Fakemon that we've seen in the past, I mean, these guys, was this before? I think this was before we had the 50 Shades. But you can see with the fake starter Pokemon, the concepts are really like cute, fun, something that you want to start your adventure with, but also keeping to a very specific theme. And maybe that's what also is very strong about the themes that we see for the Pokemon in Generation 8. You know, you can see a theme here, but it's also very reduced. People were like, oh man, like a Neopet feel almost to it. And that's also where it starts feeling away from Pokemon and more in some kind of fake concept as well. And then just other random ones it gets. Like, you look at every fake starter concept that's well done. That's an attempt to try to deceive people or an attempt to look like the real thing. And that's where we sit for Generation 8. It really feels that way, which makes things a bit extra interesting. Another one I wanted to remind you guys of was this. The one that kind of fooled people, but not really, but was immediately debunked, but had like the most research put into it ever. And these guys went all out as well. They made the design, and then they printed it on magazine paper to make it look like a Korokoro leak. The problem is they got the characters wrong, and they even talk about that. But I mean, you look at the star concept they came up with, that very well could have been Generation 8. And these like some of the more well-designed, the more well-effort ones put into it, yeah, they even like went to, you know, design the grass star. They made multiple designs. They're like, nah, not right, not right. See, this actually, some of these just look like Fakemon that would be first draft, but refining it, trying to make it feel like Pokemon. That's what people have come up with. And yeah, like that, those look really good. You could drop those, like you could replace any of the starters that we had, and you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference too much, and some people would probably like those ones more. But yeah, making the pages, you know, they were talking about this, they were talking about scanning out, like that's what it looked like. They caught it, but then they got it wrong, you know. Also forgot the Furigana. We would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling weebs. So I mean, there's like a cool history behind it. I think that it would be nice for Game Freak to take this inspiration and then just kind of comparing it to the existing starter Pokemon that we have. I feel like it fits in its own interesting way, because there hasn't really been a generation where I've loved every single starter Pokemon, that there's going to be something for everyone between the 3 starters at some point when you finally just adjust to like the sense of a new Pokemon and the sense of a new generation. So because of that, like, yeah, I think it works, and then we're gonna have to see where the evolutions go. Like, that's how some people are. Some people wait until they find out about the evolutions of the Pokemon before making their decisions. That's alright. Some people, they're just like, well, I don't care if it grows into something ugly. I want to start my adventure with something that I appreciate. I feel like that's how a lot of people felt with Chespin. You know, Claude and Chestnut, that went in a crazy direction. Maybe even with Froakie, you know, Frogadier, actually the whole Generation 6. Who thought Finnegan was just going to become an anthropomorphic wizard fox? Well, the fox part, probably. But I mean, when it comes in that, like, yeah, Delphox went kind of crazy. Also kind of wears a robe. Didn't really see that coming. Greninja becoming a ninja. So that's a thing. But I mean, when it came to, like, Popplio, Rowlet, like, these are really good. Like, Decidueye is one of the coolest Pokemon ever designed. So I'm really happy, like, that Gamefreak has made these Pokemon, as Gamefreak has taken these Pokemon in such directions, and I'm okay with that. Like, their designs are good. The inspiration from some Fakemon can be very good as well. And when I saw this, you know, when the fake starter leaks came out, or not even the fakes, the fake leaks that turned out to be real for the final evolutions of Generation 6, I looked at this, I said, that's too cool to be Game Freak. That's too cool to be real. But they did it. So I trust that the starters and the rest of the generation are in good hands when it comes to Game Freak right now. So guys, enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.